Hello and welcome to this free mandolin lesson for beginner and intermediate players on how to fill out a fiddle tune. Before we start, I should mention I'm recording this on the wettest day of the year in the UK, and so if you hear any residual thunderstorms, that's coming from over here in the microphone. In this next 10-15 minutes or so, we're going to learn the tune Liberty, which sounds like this. And we're going to do a process that I have called, for the sake of this lesson, filling it out. You can call it whatever you want, but we're going to make it sound fuller. We're going to do some interesting stuff to that melody, and hopefully we'll have something that sounds a bit like this. Before we dive in, I should mention everything we talk about in this lesson is included on a free PDF. So if you just click the link below, you can have all the tab and music in front of you while you play along with me. So for beginner players who don't know this tune and intermediate players, this is a standard bluegrass session tune. It will follow you around. Any session you go to will know Liberty, so it is worth taking the time to learn. We are going to dive in and play it. I'm not going to go through it phrase by phrase. YouTube has a very useful sort of slow down function here, and obviously you can pause as necessary. I would like to mention two things before we play the melody that you should all watch out for. Number one is in measure 1, there's 4 notes that all fall on the beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. So they should all be downstrokes. A big mistake that people fall into, you can hear the rain. A big mistake that people fall into is going down, up, which isn't the biggest deal, but that means, so first of all, you're playing upstrokes on the beat, which we never want to do on the mandolin. And also, if you're using up your downs and ups, so that's your wrist movement, how do you then play the faster notes? And also that from past experience has led that people then play the whole thing too quick. They go, and then they've got nowhere to go for the harder stuff. So make sure down, 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 and then the same on measure 3, and the same later on measure 5. The other element I should mention is there's a big sequence of sort of 18 eighth notes or quavers in a row at the end of the A part. Again, pick stroke, make sure all of those are alternate. Down, down, up, 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 down. No double downs, no double ups. It will hinder you massively in the future. You ask anyone who's had Skype lessons from me, anyone that we've corrected pick strokes, it is the best way of improving your mandolin playing. So those are the 2 elements to watch out for. Now let's dive in and let's play Liberty, and I'll overdub a guitar so you can hear it with the chords in the background. So that is 110 BPM, that's mainly just to keep me in time. Don't forget, slow me down with the cog if this is too quick for you. 2 A's, 2 B's. Here we go, after 3. 1, 2, 3. So beginner players, if you didn't quite keep up with that, that's completely fine. This is quite a sort of, that was quite quick really for beginner players. That was an intermediate speed of about 110. So either use the cog where you can slow me down, or just keep rewinding, keep trying it, eventually you'll get there. Now we can start thinking about filling out that melody. Before we do, again, I mentioned Skype students. I'm always going on about pick strokes. I'm also always going on about arpeggios. And this is another example of where they will come in extremely useful. So if you look at the chord chart written above the melody, you need D, you need G, and you need A. So laser them into your eye. When you shut your eyes at night, you should be able to see these arpeggios. D is D, F sharp, and A. And then G is G, B, and D. And then A is A, C sharp, and E. Knowing where those notes are on the mandolin quite quickly is extraordinarily useful, and you will see why in the next few minutes. Because every note that we're adding, or 99% of the notes that we're going to add to fill this melody out, are going to be arpeggio notes. So for example, bar 1 is a D chord, so the notes I'm going to think about adding are going to be notes from the D arpeggio. I'm going to add Ds, F sharps, and As. If I start adding other notes, it's okay, but it might sound a bit weird. You know, you might get some weird harmonies, but you add any note from the arpeggio, it will sound nice. So that's why arpeggio is important. So make sure those 3 arpeggios are ingrained in there before you tackle any of this kind of exercises. So I have split this into 4 little techniques that I do each time. If you'd like to skip ahead, feel free. It's all written out at the end of the PDF, but I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about each little technique that I do. So number 1 is looking for the really obvious places where we can add some extra notes. So are there some long notes where you can double stop? In this example, we've got bar 1. That's quite a simple melody because you've just stated it's 2 notes repeated. So surely that's an obvious place where we can either add some double stops from the D arpeggio. We can just, what I've decided to do is I've got an F sharp as my melody, so I've added a D and an A underneath. That's all I want to do. And I'm going to leave those notes ringing out so you get this sound. Simple as that. The second element is, my brain's always thinking like this, can I add more notes without changing the melody? So if you're playing 4 beats, 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 4 offbeats, the 4 ands that aren't being used. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and all of those ands are not being used. So why don't we use them? Why don't we put something in, maybe one of the arpeggio notes, hint hint, again, arpeggios, to create a bit more interest. So you could do this. So I've still got that in there. I've just added a D upstroke on every and. Sounds really nice. The third option, and it's sort of linked to what we were just doing, is can I alter the melody? And now we have to start treading quite carefully. Everything we did earlier was having no effect on the melody. We were just sort of adding notes around it. Now we can sort of maybe if I just push the odd note here and there, I can create something that's easier to play, nicer to play, and doesn't affect the melody so much that you lose the sense of the melody. And a really good example is that picking pattern that we just did. It's certainly at speed, that's quite difficult to do. So if we were just to slightly change the order of those open notes, if we went F sharp, A, D, A, so it's sort of da 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 instead of da 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 da. Does that make it easier? And in terms of this tune, yes it does. So I still haven't lost the sense of liberty. I've still got sort of the first melody note and the A's in there. So just a little tinker of the melody just makes it a bit easier to play and maybe nicer, maybe not. A lot of this is going to be up to you at the end. Before I discuss option 4, I think now's a good time just to have a little pause and play through the A part that I have written. So I'll put the metronome back on and so you can hear it all in action. So I've added some open notes underneath that are part of the arpeggio. I've changed my melody a little bit. I've sort of filled it out and I've added notes that weren't there before on upstrokes that weren't being used. So that's what this now sounds like. 1, 2, 3. As you can hear, that's quite drony in the end. This tune, more than any, suits open notes being added. There's occasions where it might suit non-open notes being added, but the version I've got, because we're trying to fill it out, so we're trying to make it almost trick the ear so it sounds like the mandolin's got more strings than it does, or it's a bigger instrument than it has. So that's what we're trying to go for. The fourth element, and this is where we really have to tread carefully but can do some cool stuff with, is can we alter the harmony? So is there an occasion where I can use a note that isn't in the arpeggio of the current chord that slightly changes the harmony but has a useful function? My best example of this is bars 4, 5 and 6 of the B part. So there. So originally I've put this I've put an A underneath the first one, the C sharp, E and A, and then nothing under here, just a drone, and then a low one here. So I've in the first bar I've got that on my bass, nothing in my middle bar, and then I've got a 2 on the bass. So my brain can't handle that 6 to 2. There's a 4th fret that can be played in the middle of that. You could get through those 3 bars. Now that 4 is a B natural. That's not in the D arpeggio, but it is in the B minor arpeggio. So B, D, they're very similar chords, B minor and D. So just a slight extra note, just that B there. Sort of, I'm using it more as a stepping stone between 2 bass notes rather than like a big statement. There's just little occasions like this where maybe a passing note that isn't quite in the arpeggio still has a really interesting effect, and your band won't shout at you because you've not drastically changed the chord. They could still play a D chord over this. So that phrase now sounds like this. So I've now got going through those 3 bars. So there's a nice example of where just a subtle change of harmony, maybe a note that's not in the arpeggio, can have a nice effect. The final task for this lesson is now just to play through the A part and the B part. I'm not going to overdub the guitar this time because I want you to hear all of the notes ringing out. This is a technique that doesn't necessarily suit a loud jam session. It suits a solo or duo mandolin thing. I'm going to keep the metronome at the same tempo, 110 BPM. We're going to do 2 A's, 2 B's. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Again. B part. So there we have a much more filled out version of Liberty. You can do this with any fiddle tune. So the first thing I would suggest is try your own arrangement of Liberty using the principles that I've talked about. So know your arpeggios, look for the obvious places, add some upstrokes or fill in some gaps that aren't being used. Don't be afraid to tinker slightly with the melody, and don't be afraid to ever so slightly adjust the harmony to suit lines. Just those principles. There's nothing better than just diving in and trying it. You won't imagine the amount of mistakes I've made doing stuff like this in jam sessions and the funny looks I've been given over the years. So nothing beats just going for it and working out what you do and don't like yourself. Once you've done it with Liberty, try it on any fiddle tune in G, D, A. They all suit stuff like this on the mandolin. So you take this and run with it as much as you like. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the past 15 minutes or so. Please do hit like and subscribe while you're here, and we'll see you next month.